Hey, it's Alicia. Welcome back to Nope, We're Not Monogamous, the show where we strip away all the shoulds, talk honestly about love, sex, and relationships that don't follow the script. Today's episode is for anyone who's ever felt shut down or stuck or like pleasure is something for other people. Because my guest, Xanet Pailet, I didn't get her last name pronunciation, but it's Xanet, is living proof that your sex life isn't over at 40 or 50 or 65. Girl's got it going on, I promise. So, Xanet is a former New York City healthcare lawyer who spent 26 years in a sexless marriage before she decided she was going to try something else. That led her into Tantra, non-monogamy, kink, and ultimately a full-blown reinvention as a best-selling author and intimacy coach. So today you're going to hear us talk about why pleasure is your birthright, no matter how old you are, what it was like to be in a throuple with two men, and what worked until it didn't, how safety and attachment really can change the game in ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, and how slowing down, not spicing things up, is actually the secret to great sex. Plus, you're going to hear some real stories from Xanet and her clients and what not to do when initiating intimacy, and the one piece of advice that she wishes every couple knew. So, monogamous, non-monogamous, polyamorous, kinky, whatever form of non-traditional you are, this conversation will have something for you. Enjoy. Yeah. I love it. Amazing. Cool. Well, welcome to Nope, We're Not Monogamous. I'm really happy we got to connect.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this conversation and interested to see where it goes.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, let's do this. Why don't you just let the listeners know just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I am a former healthcare lawyer who became a sex and intimacy educator and coach about 15 years ago. When I transitioned from a 26-year sexless marriage, essentially sexless marriage, went through my own sexual healing process that also led me into non-monogamy. And for the last 15 years, I've both been working with couples and with individual women to really help them reconnect with their sexuality, and with couples to help them learn how to have a better sex life, because so many people are having really bad sex. I'm also a trauma practitioner. I'm a Tantra educator. I'm a certified Somatic sex and intimacy coach. And what else am I? Oh, holistic pelvic care practitioner. I don't do that much of it. That's more hands-on work.
Amazing. Wow. That's so much. I love this. I love this. What so you went from being a New York City healthcare lawyer to a full-time sex and intimacy coach.
Exactly.
What sparked that change?
Well, I mean, what sparked it was being in a sexless marriage for 26 years. And when I was finally ready to leave that marriage at age 50, I just had to take a really deep dive, because it was really me. It wasn't my partner so much, but there was definitely, like, for me, sex was painful. It was uncomfortable. I just had lots of issues. I mean, in retrospect, I know I was totally dissociated, disconnected from my body because of some trauma I experienced as a child. But I just decided to close shop at the age of like 30 after both my kids were born. And took all my energy, put it into my work and being a lawyer at that time, and then other businesses that I started. But when I left that marriage, I had to like look at my sexuality. I was only 50 years old, right? And I was like, okay, like, I don't want this marriage anymore, but I know I want something else in my life. But, what do I go on Bumble and say, like, awesome woman, really smart, pretty, only problem is she won't ever have sex with you. Like, that wasn't going to work. Right. So it forced me to really take a hard look into, what was going on for me. And that first door that opened up for me was Tantra, sacred
Yeah.
sexuality. And that was the door that I entered into initially, but that was life changing for me because it was a completely different experience around what sex could be, what could possibly even look like. And from there, like I'm a lifelong learner. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm learning about Tantra. Now I need to learn more about like real sexuality and the psychological aspects. So I just went from one program to another to another. One of the most intense programs I did after Tantra was sexological body work. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm. Oh
So
yeah.
I'm also a
Yeah.
sexological body worker. And that was incredible. That was, also like it just opened up so many avenues for me around my own pleasure, my own orgasmic potential, all of which like I never had an orgasm until I was in my 50s, which is crazy, but true.
And you're not alone.
I'm not alone. That's the sad thing. I'm not alone. Exactly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's amazing. Oh my God, I love this so much. Mine, very similarly, after I had been monogamously for 13 years and I got divorced, and I was like, well, I want to do something different. And I dove into non-monogamy, didn't know anyone who was doing that. But I also started I went through the Vita certification coaching with Layla Martin. And so
Oh,
I
yeah.
also like dove into tantra and energy work and was like, "Oh, there is so much more possible here than just like fucking."
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The possibilities are endless, but it was like I was like a kid in a candy store,
Mm.
as I was going through my own healing. It's like, oh my God, I can have this and I can experience this and we can try this and, I can feel this. And even now, like even today, 15 years later, I'm still learning. I'm still exploring new things, with my partner. I'm so curious about, what if we did it? If we tried this, what if we got more heavily into kink? Because I learned something I really like. Who knew?
Right?
Yeah.
What is something that you learned about yourself through this, sexual awakening at 50, that you wish more people knew was possible?
Well, I think one of the things that I really wish people knew is that, we're entitled to pleasure. I always say, like, pleasure is our birthright.
Yes.
And if you're not experiencing pleasure, you need to take a hard look at that and figure out what's actually really going on in your life. Is it the relationship? Is it something that happened as a child? Was there sexual trauma that's in your past or any type of other trauma, like shame trauma, right? Or are you just like not even sure what you want or even know how to ask for it? Like all of these are possibilities, but just like I want everyone to know, like you can have orgasms at 50. In fact, I'm 65. You have the best sex I've ever had within my 60s, honest to God. Right.
Amazing. I
I really
love
want
that.
people to know that. Like your sex doesn't die at menopause. It doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly. You say pleasure is our birthright. For people who have been shut down for years, that can feel really far away. Where do they start?
Yeah. I like to start with just the non-sexual pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Can you just like identify a flower that you like to smell and go out and smell that flower?
Mm.
A drink that you like to drink that makes you feel warm and yummy inside and drink that drink and start to connect with the sensations inside of your body. Start to track. Ooh, when I smell that flower, what does it feel like inside my chest? What does it feel like in my heart? What does it feel like in my legs, right? To start to understand what pleasure actually feels like in your body. Because that's where we have to start in my opinion, in the non-sexual way. And then you can start with touch,
Yeah. 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 I love that so much. All the senses, music,
everything.
uh, food. Yeah, like all the things that like feel good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Everything that feels good. And then notice what doesn't as well.
uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
notice what's the like, oh, there, that's a yucky. Those are
Uh-huh.
important, right? They're important awarenesses as well.
Yeah, yeah. My partner said something to me the other day that kind of blew my mind that I wasn't aware of. He was like, "Oh, you have a hard time making decisions when you don't like all of the options that have been presented to you." He goes, "Because as soon as you hear an option that you like, you light up and you go, 'Yeah, I want that.'" And I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I do. I should pay attention to that."
I can relate to that as well, right? Like energetically, intuitively, you're like, yes,
Yeah.
that one. Yes, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually
Amazing.
have an
Amazing.
exercise. I have this program I offer. It's called what's it called? My Weight Body. It's just like a body awakening. It's a free program. But in one of the exercises, it's called clean out your closet. And so after you've done like all of these different exercises, start to get more in tune with your body and sensations through touch and smell and other things. Like the last exercise is you go to your closet and you look at your clothes and you start to identify like, oh, what's my yes and what's my no, what feels good and what doesn't feel good, like really starting to connect with your intuition to make decisions. That is the feminine way, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. Oh, I love that so much. It's so good.
It's a closet.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually started doing a lot of that. Like I was like, I love dressing sexy, but my God, I hate to be uncomfortable. And so I've
Mhm.
really started like getting rid of things that I feel uncomfortable in. That and a lot of times I don't realize I'm uncomfortable until I've been wearing something for a couple of hours and I'm like, why am I grumpy? I should be happy. I'm enjoying this event, but I really am grumpy. Oh, I'm uncomfortable.
That's important.
Uh-huh. Totally. Totally. So, this is the show is Nope, We're Not Monogamous. And I always like to find out about people's non-monogamy stories. And I know that you have explored some E&M, and I'm curious what that has looked like for you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my first doorway into sexuality was through Tantra. And of course, anybody who's really been to a Tantra workshop will know there's a lot of sharing that goes on there. And that was kind of like my first, a little bit of experience with non monogamy, just being with the different partners. And this was more in a very, it was a pretty strong container where we were doing like practices and exercises. But when I left New York, which is where I was living with my husband, and then when we divorced, I lived there and moved to California, San Francisco area, the Bay Area, where I was there for 7 years. I really started delving into the world of non monogamy. And I ended up, you know, getting in a relationship with somebody pretty soon after I arrived there who was non monogamous. And over about a 2.5 year period of time, somewhere in the middle of that, so he was bisexual and he ended up meeting a gay man who was a beautiful man. He was also a lawyer, African American man, and we became a throuple. And we did that for like I didn't realize that. So but that's my work. And we did that for like a year. And it was a very interesting experience of,
Yeah.
being in a really non-monogamous space with his lover. I guess that would be my, what they're called, metamor.
Metamor.
But
Yeah.
you like a metamor because like we were like, we're all living together, but we spent a lot of times together. And
Yeah.
there were some beautiful things about it, where he was able to like service my partner and I didn't have to. And that was like, oh, could wake up in the morning. I don't have to give you a blowjob. He'll give you a blowjob. Great. It was, it was totally perfect. So that was my, experience. And it was a rocky one because he ended up, when I met him, he was married, but they were in a non-monogamous relationship. And I was the very first person he ever fell in love with and ended up breaking up their marriage. She left,
Mhm.
uh, marrying somebody monogamously. I don't know if they still are. But that was really challenging for me and for him. And We broke up for a period of time. So I went through the mill with it. At the end of the day, it was really hard for me to be in a non-monogamous relationship. Like my own attachment wounds and my own jealousy. I was totally fine with him having a male lover. A throuple was great because I didn't
Yeah.
feel threatened by this guy at all. Right.
Yeah.
He was a guy.
Yeah.
But the minute my partner, and he warned me that he was going to start to want to, date other women, I was like, yeah, we're done. It was,
Yeah.
and it was hard. I loved this person, and leaving that relationship was one of the hardest things for me, but it was just tearing me apart. Like I just, I couldn't handle it. And,
Yeah.
some of my friends who are non-monogamous just looked at me and said, like, hey, Shanae, like, this isn't going to work for you.
Yeah.
Like, and I went to all of the groups of like the jealousy, the whatever you call them, the support groups, which were amazing. And I got to express my feelings, and I really tried compersion and all of that. And it didn't sit well with my nervous system at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And yeah, now I'm in a primarily, I would say right now I'm in a monogamish relationship, right? So I have a long-term
Uh-huh.
partner. We've been together for 3.5 years, but we go to sex parties. We have a lover. We play with couples, right? So we've created the non-monogamous relationship that works for both of us, where,
Yeah.
neither one of us go out on dates with anybody else, right? Like it's very much coupledom and bringing in other people or at a party. Um,
Yeah.
so I really like that aspect. Like I do like non-monogamy. I find it's freeing and it's fun and it's exciting, right?
Yeah.
And you experience different people and have that energy running through your body. Um, and this is also, I feel super safe and secure. Maybe that's it too, right? This is in a space where you really, really feel secure with that person, and then it feels okay to
Makes such
go
a
out,
difference.
and makes a huge difference to go out and play.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, as you're telling that story, I wonder if all the work that you did in that first relationship really helped you um create a foundation and have know better like what works for you and what doesn't and what you wanted in this current relationship.
Yeah, I learned so much from that relationship, and really like got a better handle on who I am and what my needs are. And, just got like stopped beating myself up about not being able
Yeah.
to be a good E&M person. Because,
Mhm.
I'm a perfectionist. It's like I can do it. I can do it, but I couldn't. Um,
Uh-huh.
and when I met my partner right away, like we had a conversation about it, our very first date. And I was just like, I would, I consider myself, and even after I left that relationship, I still considered myself monogamous. Like I got
Yeah.
like that there was a part of non-monogamy that I loved. And then there was a part that really didn't work for me, but I was very clear about what I needed and what I wanted. And
Mhm.
yeah, and he's been like super supportive of that. And he's like, if you want to go and date somebody, Janae, you can go ahead and do that. I'm totally, I haven't done that, but it's
Right.
lovely to know that I could do that. And I was like, but you can't do that. He was like, that's totally fine. I don't need to. Right. And
Yeah.
so just establishing that connection with each other where we really do feel secure, it does make a huge difference. And yes, I learned a lot. I grew a lot from
Yeah.
experience, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. I feel like a lot of people when they start like their first non-monogamous relationship, whether it's established or a new relationship for them, I feel like so many people try to make themselves fit into what it is their partner wants or what their idea is rather than figuring out what it is for them and what would work for themselves and like you had said like beating yourself up for not like getting it right or doing it perfect. I mean, I know I've done that myself. Like I've always been a pretty jealous and possessive person, but and the first couple of years being non-monogamous were so hard for me, but I wanted non-monogamy more than I wanted my relationship. Like for me, it was like, I'm going to figure this shit out because like, I never want to be monogamous again for a whole lot of reasons.
Right.
And also, it was so hard. It was so hard.
And I want to honor you for that because I think that people, who like can work through that, I just have so much acknowledgement. I'm like, wow, that's amazing that you can do that, because I know I couldn't. And it was, I don't
Yeah.
think I could have. I don't think
And
I
a
could
lot of
have
people
without
can't.
like having a nervous breakdown. Like really my nervous system, even in that relationship, my nervous system got shot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be really traumatic. I've had people go, I feel like I'm going through a trauma. And I was like, you literally are.
Yeah.
Like, you literally are.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you have now in this relationship found like built as a built a foundation of security and then went, okay, here's the things that feel good and here's the ways that we can do it and here's the things that are exciting and we want to have this couple, this central couple and then do these things that feel good for us. How I'm curious for that, what have been the best ways to create your agreements? Like how has that come about?
Yeah. I'd like to tell you that we have like very specific agreements, but I think what's really happened is I think we've touched every situation differently and we have just good communication. That is one of the reasons that I wanted to stay in the non-monogamous world is because, the level of communication that
Mhm.
people in the Bay Area E&M community have were amazing. Right. I mean, that was, I learned so much about that, about the vulnerability, about really sharing what was actually happening. So I think with my partner and I, we just sort of take it on a case by case basis and then have conversations like we're going to the sex party, tonight. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, what do how do you want to play? Are there any boundaries that, we have for a pretty long time? Our boundary was no penetrative sex. That's my boundary. He didn't really care, but that was my boundary. But we would just have conversations, before we would go to an event or an activity and say like, hey, how do you want to make this, come out tonight? And if, something changes, just let's check in with each other. Very often even at the parties, we kind of spend time together. Sometimes we go off and do our own things, but we always come back together at some point. But so it's just been like really good communication around what our desires, and needs are. And then like, oh, this couple seems interested, like, interesting. What do you think about them? Do you want to like get to know them? Should we take them out to dinner? Like, how do we navigate that as well?
I love that. So it really all kind of comes back to really clear communication.
It does.
Like
It
like
does.
everything.
Everything comes back to clear communication. Sure.
Yeah, and like saying all the things.
Needing all of the things. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I'm curious, um do you ever bring up the possibility of non-monogamy with when you're working with clients?
I do. Um, Sometimes it works. So, I think there certainly are a lot of marriages, relationships where, for one reason or another, like one of the partners is just doesn't want to have sex, right? Whether there's a lot of trauma. I mean, I've definitely had experiences where there's so much trauma on one side that like this person just can't even be touched. Anytime our partner tries to touch them, even though they're doing trauma work, it just takes so long to unwind that. That I have sometimes suggested, oh, would you consider non-monogamy? Is that something, that you guys would even talk about? And I, for me, it's like not that big a deal to bring it up,
Yeah.
but I have certainly had one or two situations where they were so upset that I brought it up that I lost them as a client. Which,
Wow.
yeah, which really, I was like, wow, okay, which really, kind of surprised me. But that just shows us how socialized we are towards monogamy, right?
Yep.
For me,
Yep.
somebody was like, seeing sex work or something it was basically a massage with a happy ending. And
Uh-huh.
I said, well, it was just a massage with a happy but they honestly that's like non-monogamy, but that actually broke up wasn't the only thing, but that ended up
Yeah.
breaking up their marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I sometimes I have I just have a very open mind, right? I mean, I don't have any judgment on any of this. And I feel like however your relationship works. Like whatever you need, right? You create
Mhm.
the sex life that you need. You create the relationship that you want, however you want to craft it. But yeah, I definitely have, I'd say more times than not, at least brought it up as, a possibility.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it sounds like it would be a good idea to try it, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm definitely a pro non-monogamy choice if that's something that feels might work for your relationship. And some of the times, like they do try it, and they have found that it has solved some of the issues, or it's just opened up a whole new world for them, right? And so
Mhm.
it that people are willing to like take risks.
Yeah. 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 I always wonder, when I hear about people that are in a sexless marriage, um, for reasons like that. And I always wonder, like, it it feels hard to know how to support because it's like on one hand, a partner wants to be supportive of their partner, but on the other hand, now they are also not able to have sex because they're in a monogamous relationship with someone who can't have sex with them. And so it's like at what point do they do they go, okay, well, I need sex in my relationship.
Yeah,
How do we like it just feels such a hard problem.
it is a really hard problem. And I think part of it is like first we want to look at why is it a sexless marriage? Right? Because
Yeah.
so much of the time it's not because there's some sort of dysfunction or disability, right? Or trauma. It's like there's something else going on. Like they're not having sex because they're not emotionally connected with each other, that there's been, a lot of relationship issues. Because I always feel that, and you probably agree with this, right? Like sexual challenges in the bedroom are just symptomatic, generally speaking, of something else going on in the relationship. And what we really need to do is get down to like what's going on. Is there a lot of resentment that's been built up? Often, yes. Right? There's a
Uh-huh.
lot of reason people withhold sex, but I have a couple I've worked with. They actually did a retreat with me, and 6 months later, but I just talked to her recently. They haven't had sex in like 6 months, and she was like, "I just gave up. I gave up, initiating, but I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to do something about it." And then we went through the choices. Well, look, here are the choices, right? You can work on the relationship some more. In this case, I think there's sexual trauma on his side that is having an impact, right? Because he's not
Yeah.
willing to deal with it. You can go and have an affair. Plenty of people do it that way.
Right.
Or, you can leave the marriage and look for somebody else who you can have sex with. Or you can consider, going outside of the marriage and actually talking about it and letting him know, right? And those are the options that would like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I think, and she's like, well, what do I do? I said, well, I think, you've put it out there. You're hoping something's going to happen in some period of time, but you give yourself a time frame. If you haven't, if nothing's happened in the next 3 months, then maybe you address that issue. Like, look,
Mhm.
I've asked you to do this work. I love you. She doesn't want to leave. We've had that conversation. I'm going to have to go outside of the marriage and see how that goes. Right. That will scare him enough that he'll realize I really have to do my work.
Yeah,
Right.
that is so hard if one partner like, "I'm fine with this," and not don't wanna make any changes.
Right. Right. Or
unless
they're
there's a reason to make changes.
right. Or they're just frozen and, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a terribly sad situation when that happens. Right. And I feel everybody's pain. And, if you're a really sexually vibrant person, you know, and you're having sex with yourself anyway, it's still not enough. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's a
Absolutely.
hard place to be.
Woo!
Oh,
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know.
You have a book coming out.
I have a new book that's going to be published. I have a book out.
What's
Uh,
that one?
that's called Living an Orgasmic Life. It's been out since
Oh,
2000. Yeah, Living an Orgasmic Life, Heal Yourself and Awaken Your Pleasure. So that book primarily written for books, sorry, for women.
for
Um,
book readers.
well, primarily for women, though a lot of men have read it. It
Yeah.
incorporates my own in very a lot of detail, my own sexual healing story, as well as client cases, and then a lot of like very practical exercises. The first half of the book is about everything that blocks us from having pleasure. And then the second half of the book is like, how do you reclaim your pleasure? Uh,
Mm.
yeah, and that's a beautifully juicy book. And then I have a new book coming out, but not until March of 2026, and that is called the Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit. How to enhance communication and create a lifetime of passionate intimacy. And that will be geared towards couples, very specifically towards,
Mm.
yeah.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there were if there were one thing that you could if there were one piece of advice that you could give couples for having a better sex life, what would that be?
God, there's so many pieces of it. Okay, well, I think the first and most important part is just to slow everything down. I mean, I just think that that is the biggest issue that I see like time and time again. There's not enough time for foreplay ever, ever. It's, um, and there's too much pressure on orgasm and genitals. And like, if people could just slow everything down and just be in the journey and not worry about the destination, their sex life will
Mhm.
improve tenfold. But all the pressure that we put on each other just makes it intense, and causes problems, right? Because if your partner is expecting you to have an orgasm every single time, right? And you don't, you start getting in your head and worrying about like, oh my God, I'm close, but I'm not having it. And like you've got to like slow things down so you can get in your body and feel what's actually going on. Because sex happens in
Mm.
the body, guys, not in the brain. Not in your head. But sometimes it does in fantasy, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's really
Yeah.
really knowing what's happening in your body. So I think when you slow things down, you can really track what's happening and be more attuned to each other. What would you
Yeah.
say? What would your
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, one, I agree with that 100%. I would say talk about all the things that turn you on, even if you're scared that your partner won't like it or won't want it, because like we have this idea that because once you say a thing that it has to happen, but it doesn't. It's just talking about like, here are things that I find erotic. Here are things that I find sexually arousing. Doesn't mean I have to do them, right? Like, I have a tentacle kink, that doesn't mean I wanna fuck an octopus, right? Like, that is not something I want, but I can talk to my partners about, like, "Here's some cool porn I watched that really turned me on." I don't want it in real life, but it's a
Mhm,
thing that arouses me,
mhm. Love
which then
that.
creates a safe space for your partner to say things to you,
Right, right.
and you don't have to do any of it. You can just talk about it.
Right. I really love that. And I love your point because I tell couples this all the time. Like sometimes fantasies are best just left as a fantasy. You can
Yeah.
talk about it and it can be a huge turn on, but just as a fantasy, because you might try it. Like I've done that and tried it. And I'm like, oh my God, that was
Never
horrible.
mind.
Let's just keep that in like the conversational fantasy world as opposed to let's actually try that in real life.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I do think people have a lot of fear and a lot of shame around sharing fantasies and their desires. And yeah, I mean, that's a big piece, right? Communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share?
Um, I want I'd like to share about what happens or why I'm actually in my work. I'm actually just doing intensive retreats, um,
Yeah.
primarily than working one on one. So 5 years ago when I moved to Asheville and bought a home, I started a company called Passionate Intimacy Retreats, and that's where I spend the bulk of my time. And I offer, the way I work with couples is I do intensive they're 4-day retreats where we work over like a long period of time, 13 hours over 4 days, and they get to stay in our very sexy Airbnb, kinky, sexy Airbnb. But the way that I work is probably very similar to the way that you work as well with that from your Layla training is that, for me, really being able to connect intimately and erotically is through a felt sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the work is very somatic and we take a very deep dive. So it's experiential and it's interactive. And I teach about different types of touch. And then we get to try that. And we work on like, what does initiation actually look like? And I'm like, so show me what initiation looks like. And usually it's terrible. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, we try this. And what if we try that? Right. And so it's very experiential and interactive. And so people start to really get a sense of what embodied sexuality and intimacy feels like. And because we're in this space where we're doing long 3-hour sessions, when stuff shows up, which it always does, we get
Yep.
to actually really unpack it and work with it. So, like, I always teach a very extensive repair process because
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that actually saves a relationship. I know it saves mine, is like really learning how to repair when there's some sort of conflict that goes on, but it shows up in the moment. And so it really sticks. And we actually get to heal a lot of pieces, which I found was impossible to do for me personally. And this is probably just my weakness. One on one on Zoom for an hour a week.
Yeah.
It just didn't work
Yeah.
for me. And it didn't work for my couple. So like an immersive, experiential, interactive space where you really have dedicated time with a coach for me in my book is the most effective way to actually transform your relationship. And I've done over 100 of these. I would say the vast majority, 60, 70% are still in a really good space and still will,
Yeah.
say like, oh, we're still working on this and we've learned that and, et cetera. But they've really seen changes that happen. So that's something that I think is unique.
Yeah.
uh, that I
Oh,
offer.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It's awful fun. It's really
Yeah.
fun, right? Because you don't know who's going to show up and what the weekend's going to look like, and where we're going to go with it, and like everyone for me is like a new discovery, right? So I find that fascinating.
That's so fun. I love that. And uh, I think there's a lot of people looking for that. Like, will someone literally hold my hand?
Really.
So just tell me what to do.
Yeah,
Like, how do we get there?
yeah,
Because every time I get alone, I fuck it up.
yeah. Because nobody teaches us how to have sex, right? And nobody
Mhm.
teaches us how to touch, and we usually touch our partner the way we think they want to be touched, but we're not really focused on our own pleasure and our own
Yeah.
sensation. Therefore, our touch feels unconscious, and like we tend to have very vanilla sex, right? And, I don't think it's about positions. I've never thought it's about positions. I think it's about the emotional connection, building the erotic energy. But like, people don't know how to do that a lot by themselves. Like, they actually really need to be taught these pieces. And I feel super grateful that I get to like teach people like that. It's
Love
fun.
that. I love that so much.
It's better than being a lawyer.
Yeah, I bet. How can people find you?
They can find me on the website, Passionate Intimacy Retreats with an S.com. And then I'll give you this for the show notes as well. I have a free gift, which is
Yeah.
10 ways to reignite your relationship tonight. So there's 10 sort of juicy questions about intimacy and sex. It really gets the conversation going because that's where it starts.
That's amazing. So good. Thank you. I will. I'll put those in the show notes. I have one more question for you. And this goes is not on the main podcast episode, but is kind of a behind the scenes for our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/notmonogamous. And it's called Just the Tip. And uh, this time I have like
Right.
4 quick like lightning round questions.
Okay.
Amazing. I love that so much. That's so good. Thank you. Oh, fantastic. This was so much fun, and I am so happy you came on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a delightful conversation. And yeah, thanks for having me. It was just really fun.
Wow, what a great conversation. Huge thanks to Xanet for sharing so generously with us and reminding us that it's never too late to reclaim your pleasure. If you love this chat, but you didn't get to hear all the juiciness that she just gave us for just the tip, it was a bonus lightning round. You're going to want to head over to patreon.com/notmonogamous to get the exclusive there. There's some juicy stuff there, and you can get that. Support the show. Head over to Patreon. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this, like everything, all the likey buttons, follow buttons, subscribe buttons, leave a comment or a review. Just engage with the episode so that other people can find it and we can bring more awareness to non-monogamy and the mainstream. I love you all. Bye.